Now you can hear me. So, good morning. Thank you again for coming and for joining us online. My name is Anatoly Motkin. I'm president of StrategEast. And our session is devoted to the future of the tech labor market in Eurasia. And first, let me introduce our distinguished guests and speakers. Michael Cowgill, president of American Chamber of Commerce in Georgia. Christopher Edwards, who is joining us online, and he's head of Usaid regional mission in Central Asia. Catalin Gherman, deputy head of cooperation in the delegation of the European Union in Georgia. Michael Honigstein, political and economic consular, US Embassy in Tbilisi. And Irakli Nadareishvili, deputy minister of economy and sustainable development of Georgia. So again, thank you for joining us. And the basic question today is first, we're in very hectic times, and it's clear that many industries should adjust themselves to the new reality. But even before the pandemic, it was clear that the digitalization of all spheres of the economy, both in Georgia but worldwide, is important. So I would appreciate if each one of them, from his perspective, would describe how he sees the digital development or digitalization or the tech labor market, how we call it, here in Georgia, and then we will keep on to follow-up questions. So, Mr. Cowgill, from your perspective, both you're president of university, Georgian American University, so you have a lot to do with the education, and on the other hand, you are the chairman of the AmCham here in Georgia. Please.
Thanks. Hello?
You should turn on this block.
Testing. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Anatoly. Yes, I do wear a couple of hats in this, as you see, as president of the American Chamber of Commerce, but also president and co-founder of Georgian American University, which also has an IT program. I can come at this from a couple of perspectives. So just a brief outline here of what I'm going to talk about. The Georgia and the ICT sector, the challenges that we face here in Georgia, then about the education in Georgia for this issue, because I come at it from many different sectors. One, I have a university. We also collaborate with GeoLab, which is on our premises, which has short courses. Then I also have the elementary and the high school ages. School children now have a netbook. Yes, it's a lower level, but at least it is a start. But the ICT lessons in school now are only in the 5th and 6th grades. That's very late for students to start understanding things. It's my understanding, it hasn't been completed yet, but we're hearing discussions within the Ministry of Education that they're going to push the education for information technology down into the 1st and 2nd grade. So start from there and then continue on, which is a very initiative that we feel. The problem in the school system, often the students become the teachers very quickly, is that a lot of the teachers in schools have limited knowledge in these ICT fields. Many times, use of computers isn't mandatory. Homework isn't done on computers. So this also is a limitation. Short courses, as I mentioned, we also have a GeoLab on campus. What's good about the short courses is that they're almost always demand-oriented. They're more flexible. They adapt themselves to online learning in pandemic situations. And they tend to be fairly cost competitive. On the universities, this is very interesting that only 5 out of the 62 accredited higher education institutions in Georgia have BA and MA programs in computer science. I'll talk more about the universities in a minute. The fourth component of this education for ICT has to do with self-education. And many, many people in Georgia don't feel they need to go to a 4-year university. Some of them don't take the short courses, but they go online. And there are a lot of the certifications, a lot of programs, a lot of things that are free that are online. One of the problems has to do with most of those also are in English, so it forces them to have kind of an English fluency to be able to work on those online programs. What are the advantages we find of a 4-year degree or a 2-year, sometimes a professional degree, is that the universities have some other programs that I know the employers find valuable. Communication skills, presentation skills, things like project management. So sometimes they have very well-equipped laboratories. Of course, from our side, continuing to upgrade the software and hardware. Hardware is also expensive from our side, but it's something that then we have the obligation to do. Again, access to other resources, which is the lectures, the one-on-one type mentoring, also the libraries. They also have networking opportunities. The short courses, they get a certificate. They have more targeted type programs for exactly what they want to take and what they need. It's a shorter duration. In some cases, there is a need for personal technical equipment. You have to sometimes have your own equipment at home, whereas in the university situation, you can go there and get to fully equipped labs. And again, the networking opportunities. The self-education, online certification, opportunities to develop your own curriculum, what you need specifically. Flexible schedule, a lot of people don't just adhere to these other types of schedules during the day or evening. A lot of the IT people like to work at midnight or 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. and it suits that kind of scheduling. You have to have your own technical infrastructure. You need to be self-motivated. Those of us who've ever done ARIA or done your own education know that there's a self-motivation that you have to have, and you have to keep at it. And again, the same thing as I mentioned about the language skills. One of the problems we found, not just in IT, but it is even more poignant in IT, has to do with how do students decide about a profession? And we found that that is the #1 problem in the school system in Georgia, and it's even more acute here because a lot of the lecturers, as we said before, are not proficient in IT, so they can't very well counsel the students in what kind of IT professions they are, how to steer them and guide them into what it should be their next step in the education process. The employment aspect, really there are 3 types of things. Whether you've gone any of those routes I mentioned before, whether you have a university degree or self-educated, or you have gone the short course situation, you work for a Georgian company, you work for an international company, but you're based here in Georgia, or you work remotely for international companies. We've heard a lot about, and one of the issues, I know the points about this panel also had to do with brain drain. Let me just tell you what we're finding on the brain drain aspect. It's not people that are going abroad immediately after their studies, unless they've studied outside and decide to stay, and I guess that's still considered to be brain drain. It's people that have gained experience here, and then they become more valuable, and then they realize that they can make a lot more money, and that they realize again that they would prefer to have a different kind of living and lifestyle. With that, that's kind of the basis that we see. I will just add one more note. I spoke with some of my colleagues from UGT, which UGT, if you don't know, is the largest IT development company kind of in the region. And I had kind of verification of the things that I'm telling you here. What they look for not necessarily a 4-year degree, but it's sometimes valuable to them. They look for people that have these certifications, things whether it's short courses or whether they have done some of the online certification. Experience for them is the number one thing that they look for. But if they don't have experience and they have some of these other things, they're looking for also younger people that they believe have the potential, because they take them, making sure that they have this kind of motivation, to be able to learn more and more, and then they'll take them and train them. So they're looking at people from all of these three different types. Again, the more senior ones, they have to have experience. The more junior ones, they have to have this potential for motivation and the ability to go on in their learning within that company. Right? Anatoly, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And just to mention that yesterday, Arkady Dobkin, president of one of the biggest engineering companies in the world, a US-based company, declared that they're starting their operation here in Georgia in opening office, which is also great news for us here in this forum. And now I would like to switch to Christopher Edwards in Almaty. And from Christopher, from your perspective, how the things look like there in Central Asia, and you're responsible in charge of whole Central Asia for all countries, not only for Kazakhstan. And what's also the role of USAID mission there in the region? We hear you. It's one of the disadvantages of remote conferencing. So let the moderator behind the scenes let me know when it works, and so I'll turn to you, Catalin. From perspective of EU, first, we know that the two priorities for EU these days are the Green Deal and the digitalization. So could you please tell a little bit more about those priorities and how it works here in the region in collaboration with your mission here?
Good, sure. Is it working?
You should turn on.
Me? I think you can hear me,
yeah.
Right? Okay, good. Thank you, Anatoly, for inviting me here. I've seen this room full of people up to now, so it's a bit weird now. But we go ahead this way. Indeed, anyway, thanks not only for inviting, but also for picking up this theme for this forum. As we talked before, digital, I think, is the second most frequent word that we use now, apart from COVID. It's really topical, and it's normal, natural to be this way, because we all have changed and moved a lot more into the digital world, not only us as individuals, but also the businesses, of course. They had to adapt and move from physical presence to digital, as well as the government had to also adapt its policies. So I think this is really timely. Now I will say a few words about the EU angle to that. So my presentation will be a bit atypical, because it's not going to be very much at the implementation level, so it will be more at the policy and planning level, less at the project based. But I hope that would be interesting for you as well. Again, you have mentioned already, and rightly so, the new commission that took office, European Commission that took office back in December last year, even before COVID hit us all, has set the green and the digital agenda, both of them very much interconnected, aiming to of course, make progress on these two fronts. There is a top priority, really, and that has already been seen by translating let's say, the wish into a policy paper. End of February, there was a communication on the Europe's digital future that has announced a full-fledged strategy to be developed as of next year, which will then lay out the digital transformation approach of the European Commission. So I think it is important to know that the aim to have the digital transformation on the top of the EU agenda was already coming before the COVID. So that was already identified as one of the priorities. Now, why do we do that, and why Commissioner President von der Leyen has decided to do so? Because the main reason basically is, of course, that there was a clear evidence that the digital technologies, they have lots of benefits on all fronts. I mean, really, it's not only the economy, let's say, or the specific sector of economy, but it's also agriculture, it's energy, it's education, it's public administration reform, civil service, everything. So basically, it really touches on all the sectors of the society. But there are still quite a lot of challenges. I mean, there is a big connectivity divide that we should not allow to further increase. There is also underrepresentation from the gender perspective. There is also the big challenge of seeing the digital technologies being misused that we've seen in many instances. And if the progress of the digital technology is not accompanied in parallel by the progress on awareness and digital literacy, then we can have a lot of negative effects that we don't want to have. It's not only about control, manipulation, and radicalization, and that things I think we know pretty well as well in the region, but also it's about the infringement of the fundamental rights and the freedoms, the human rights, and this is also one of the main concerns I think that the European Union has put into the whole logic of the digital transformation. Therefore, there is a clear guideline that we have now, from now on, to mainstream cybersecurity in our development cooperation, including in Georgia, and I think here we started already to work on this aspect. Now, a few very helicopter views on the 4 pillars for the digital transformation, the way that it's being seen by our political masters back in Brussels. So it's on the first front, which is the governance, the policy, and the regulatory. Without that, of course, no action can be taken if it's not backed by a proper, functional, valid piece of law. Then there is the, let's say, infrastructure angle. There has to be investment into the connectivity so that people have, not only, and businesses have, of course, access to this type of technologies. Then we talk about the digital literacy and the skills that I mentioned before, including the entrepreneurship. And of course, there's also our common scope with our UN colleagues and friends on the achievement of the SDGs, because all the e-services have to be really put in line with that. That communication I mentioned that was adopted already in February, basically it's focused on at 3 layers. It's first people, so digital technologies, they have to have people first, but they also have to help economy and businesses. And let's not forget about our important wish to see democracies functional, open, sustainable, and without backtracking from their progress. So that is also one important dimension that sometimes we perhaps tend to forget in this whole approach, but it's really important for us. If we zoom in a bit now on from the widest policy perspective into the region, let's say into the Eastern Partnership, there has been a joint communication released and discussed with the EU institutions, EU member states, as well as the partner countries that have set up the priorities for the next phase of the Eastern Partnership from 2020 onwards. And among the 5 priorities, you will see that digital transformation is there. So again, this is reflected at this point in time at the policy level, but that's the first step. And that is translated in practice with an intention to work on these 4 aspects that you can see there. So digital infrastructure, e-governance, digital economy, and innovation, as well as cyber resilience. Again, cyber is important, and it's also including that component on the fundamental rights. A lot of the priorities in different frameworks, they coincide because basically they have been identified more or less the same. Now, again in the region, so in the Eastern Partnership, there are a few, let's say, focal areas that have been selected to be focused on, and that you can see the harmonization of the roaming. There are a few regional projects working on that, the promotion of the high-speed broadband internet, and then the creation of the jobs in the digital industry. I think we've been progress there, and I'm sure the Deputy Minister can tell us a bit more about that, and we want to see them continuing on this line ahead, of course. And there is also a regional project called EU for Digital that runs a series of activities in the areas that you see there. Now, in Georgia specifically, we do also plan to, of course, translate all these nice words into practice. We were ready to already start investing, let's say, substantially in cooperation on this topic already this year, but COVID has turned us back, so we had to postpone plans to basically support the government priorities under the National Broadband Development Strategy from this year to next year. Hopefully, we have space for that, and we're not diverted by other things. But again, you will see here the priorities that we also intend to tackle under this bilateral program, which is a multi-million program. Hopefully we will be able to put in place towards the end of or define towards the end of the year, and then start already discussing it more in detail next year. To finalize, only just a few messages. I mean, some of them I think have been mentioned already. Michael, he mentioned the education, and I think that's really important, not only from the digital perspective, but in general from the angle of the job creation, of the progress of the economy, and so on. So I think that's really important. Of course, it's important to start with first discussing a bit more about digital transformation in the higher political circles, and also push this up on the agenda. Then the Parliament, I think, has also to be made a bit more aware, and also equipped with what it needs to better understand and work on the legislation that needs to lay the ground for actions in this field. Awareness, we mentioned already. Many people know about that, but maybe they don't know all, or they don't know the right things. Education, e-learning, mentioned already. I think it's really important. There is an impression that the education system really has a strong component on digital, but I think in practice the reality shows that that's a bit less than we expected. Further investment, of course, in the medium-sized enterprises on the digital transformation. And finally, creativity has to be continuously an area to be invested in, because that's where the good ideas come from, and that's what also stimulates companies to invest in innovation and research. So that was my short presentation, but of course ready for further questions and discussions.
Thank you, Catalin, for this comprehensive presentation. And as I understand, our technical issues were resolved, and we're back to Chris Edwards in Almaty. Chris, I'll ask again the question. From your perspective, there in Central Asia, and you're in charge of the USAID activity in whole Central Asia. How does the future of the labor market there how does it look to you, and what's the role of USAID in tech labor market development in the region?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm glad I made connection, and I'm very sorry that I can't be there in Tbilisi. My presentation is a slightly different response to the question. We do not have an IT education portfolio here, but we do contribute greatly to the labor market and job creation. And so if you'll permit me, I will respond again in a slightly different way in terms of what we are doing to create jobs. We do, by the way, do have affiliations with various universities, principally here in Kazakhstan on a master's level, which greatly creates educational opportunities, particularly in the energy sector, which is what I'm going to talk about. So I'm the regional mission director for USAID in Central Asia. Our program covers Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and the Kyrgyz Republic. And what we're trying to do here throughout all of our sectors is increase the regional connection of these 5 countries, because we feel that if there's a strong regional connection, then they have a greater economic base in order to create jobs. And that's really, job creation is the primary focus of our portfolio. One of the key aspects of USAID's work in Central Asia is to support, as I mentioned, the regional cooperation and connectivity among Central Asian countries with the neighboring regions. We believe that only by working together will countries be able to reduce barriers to economic growth, job creation, while creating opportunities for investment, not only regional investment, but international investment, again, creating jobs. Our efforts in Central Asia are focused on 3 main sectors, which are foundational for the regional economic growth: trade and enterprise development, energy, environment, including transboundary water management. Again, a direct link to increasing job creation and providing educational opportunities for many. At the center of our work in the region is what we call the C5+1, which is a presidential diplomatic platform, C5 meaning all 5 countries in Central Asia. The 1 means 2 things: the regionality of the program plus involvement with the United States. We also lead the implementation on another key regional connectivity initiative, the Central Asia Regional Energy Market, which seeks to increase energy sector cooperation throughout the region. We partner with governments, the private sector, and other donors to improve enabling environments for businesses, private sector, create business-friendly policies, and attract foreign investments. We also partner with governments, the private sector, and donors to improve enabling environments for business, creating business-friendly policies, and attracting investment. Each year, we have something called the Central Asia Trade Forum, which are held through various capitals in the region. This brings together governments, businesses, and thought leaders, along with educational leaders, to discuss solutions for improving regional trade. Sectors in support include horticulture, transport, logistics, and information technology, which I gather is key to your forum being held in Tbilisi. As the region pursues improvements in the infrastructure and institutions, more robust integration of the region's energy markets, and economic growth based on energy trading, we stand ready to help for this important and key vision. In partnership with host country governments, donor agencies, and educational institutions, our efforts positively impact on the regulatory and policy reforms to improve governance and performance. And finally, I'd like to close that over the last 2 decades, we have partnered here with people and governments in Central Asia to promote a regional dialogue and cooperation to address environmental challenges, again, thus creating jobs. For example, we've created 13 small basin councils in 8 transboundary rivers, which are now taking ownership. Again, it's a bit of a different take from what you all are saying, but we are closely aligned with job creation and therefore educating students to address the modern needs of Central Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Next question, I would like to address you, Michael. You as a political and economic counselor here in the embassy, from your perspective also of the American investment in Georgia, which we know per capita may be one of the biggest in the world, if we calculate it this way, what do you think should be the role of the institutionally of the U.S. Here in Georgia in developing the tech industry in this country, and maybe from a regional perspective?
I think that it's really important that it has to be a partnership. So it has to be a partnership between private sector in Georgia, between the government in Georgia, and the international community. And I think that, as I'll get to a little more in my remarks, but I'll say that You want to have a safe environment with educated workers and a place that's attractive for U.S. businesses. I think one of Georgia's advantages has been that they actually are generally seen as, albeit a small market, but they hit a lot of the things that U.S. investors are looking for. And I think that there's probably opportunities in the future to leverage that, to leverage the talent of the Georgian people, and to leverage the government, which has prioritized making this an attractive business environment, to make Georgia even more attractive.
Thank you. Thank you. And if I may ask, if you have had your remarks prepared, would be happy to hear.
All right.
Please.
So I'll go ahead and go to my prepared remarks, and then we can,
Please.
if you have more questions, we can
Please.
follow up. So what I did want to focus on in my prepared remarks is what it takes to create an IT sector that's attractive to American businesses and American investors. The U.S. government, as part of our policy, is committed to promoting technology entrepreneurship. We see it as a good way to stimulate local economic growth, to create better quality jobs, to open up new markets for U.S. companies, and to increase global economic prosperity and security more generally. So when American businesses are looking to invest in the technology sector, there's a handful of things that they want, which in general are not very different from what American businesses and other foreign investors are looking for in the investment environment more broadly, which is stable, corruption-free environments. First, I think they want to know their investments will not fail because of the political risk that's attached to it. Countries where you need to have personal connections to the government and to leadership are not very attractive. This also applies in technology to the public procurement for technology-related projects. I think, in a lot of cases, companies won't bid if there's doubts about the integrity of the process. And if you have qualified companies not bidding, this can result in lower quality goods and services in the technology sector in general. Second, I think countries want American investors want to know that there's rule of law and there's capacity for dispute resolution in a way that's fair and equitable. And that's why you'll see that one of the many reasons the U.S. Embassy focuses a lot on the need for judicial reform in Georgia, so that businesses can come in and can be confident that if they have a contract, that that contract will be honored and enforced. And then third, and equally important for American businesses especially, is the need for an educated, talented workforce. My USAID colleague touched on it a little bit. Michael touched on it a little bit, but that's one of the top ways to make it attractive, is to have a pool of talented, educated workers. So at the U.S. Embassy, part of our job is to serve as a resource for American businesses that are looking to invest in or to expand into Georgia. But I can tell you that the most important thing when an investor is considering coming into Georgia is what their buddies say. They'll call their friends in the industry. They'll say, what was your experience like? How were the people? Were the people good to work with? How was it? That's why when you start working for an American business, even if it's a small project, it's critical that you keep in mind that you're representing your country basically to the entire industry. And through that, even small projects can lead down the line to even much bigger investments when the American businesses have a positive experience. And then finally, I'd like to talk about a few of the aspects that are in the technology sector that are different than many other businesses. So American businesses want to know that their data will be safe and secure, that their intellectual property rights will be protected and enforced, and that there will be equal opportunity for businesses to bid on technology procurements. The biggest focus in Eurasian countries has been threats from Russia, and I think that there's a reason for that. However, the threat from the one-party rule by the Chinese Communist Party in the People's Republic of China, in the PRC, is real. And I think it's an important and growing consideration for American technology companies that are coming from a democracy looking to work overseas. The IP Commission in the United States found in 2017 that a theft of American IP cost American businesses between $225 billion and $600 billion a year, the majority of which is due to PRC-affiliated actors. And then unfortunately, the PRC's theft of IP and the forced transfer of technology is not limited to US companies. Indeed, the PRC is engaged in trillions of dollars in intellectual property theft around the world, including in the United States, often hacking into companies' computers to do it, according to a 2018 US national cybersecurity strategy. So these sophisticated attacks include stealing business patents, technology, trade secrets, trademarks, and copyrights. And this need for security is one of the reasons the United States has been leading efforts globally to encourage partner countries, such as Georgia, to only use equipment from trusted 5G vendors in their networks, including companies from Europe and Korea, such as Ericsson, Nokia, and Samsung, over untrusted vendors from the PRC, namely Huawei and ZTE. It's also why the US is spearheading the 5G Clean Path Initiative and the Clean Networks Initiative. The Clean Network Program is the Trump administration's comprehensive approach to guarding our citizens' privacy and our companies' most sensitive information from aggressive intrusions by malign actors, such as the CCP. These programs are rooted in internationally accepted digital trust standards to protect the intellectual property and the national security of all of our countries. I think the tide is turning against untrusted 5G vendors from the PRC in favor of trusted vendors from democracies with rule of law. And we've been encouraging Georgia to join the US and other NATO partners to choose secure 5G vendors. I mean, basically, if you're investing in overseas, you want to make sure that whatever technology transfer, intellectual property is created there is safe. I would also say that the action of malign actors requires a greater focus on cybersecurity, which can impact the entire telecom and internet infrastructure. Georgia suffered from a big attack last summer that disabled several government sites for days. Georgia's made important strides in this area, including detailed cybersecurity strategies and establishments of certs. However, more work is needed to establish systems to protect critical infrastructure. And public-private dialogue among Georgia, US, European firms can contribute to addressing ways to strengthen vulnerable infrastructure. So to summarize, I think we're looking for an industry that is what all investors are looking for: rule of law, the ability to compete on a level playing field, educated workforce, and then specifically in the IT field, that when we work on networks overseas, that the intellectual property will be safe and secure.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. And to you, Irakli, your position is very important. You are almost in charge of IT development in this country because you are deputy minister, and together with Avto, you are working on developing IT industry here. So we would like to hear from your perspective, what do you see, how do you see, and how do you plan to develop the tech labor market and tech industry in Georgia?
Thank you, Anatoly, for this question, and first of all for inviting me to this very important and interesting forum. But before I get to the point of our discussion and your question, let me tell you that I'm just coming from the opening ceremony of the United Nations World Tourism Organization Executive Council, which is held next door hotel here in Tbilisi. And well, this is not about specifically IT, but the opening remarks of the Secretary General and the representative countries, they were about innovation, of course. Innovation in this sector, which is more necessary today than ever before, I guess. And of course, innovation on its side is related to IT technologies and this field, which is very important to discuss in every direction of today's world. It also was about how countries globally unite to overcome difficulties and threats and challenges, and how to develop further and get stronger and more resilient. And I believe that so does this forum today about countries' cooperation and overcoming the challenges and looking at the perspective of very important sector of IT development. And I think Georgia is always a good idea for such gatherings as a country, as a host country and place, especially in these non-easy times of global pandemic, where our country has proved to be among the best fighters with COVID-19, and with COVID-19, and we also are expecting to use this advantage in many other directions together with the advantages that Georgia has, and colleagues have been discussing this in their presentations. But let me get to the point of our discussion today. Standing at the edge of today's technological revolution encourages us to think globally, and we all agree that technological innovation, political change, and economic policy are three main forces driving any country's success in global integration. Of course, not every country will benefit from technological development in the same way and same scale. And new technologies now enable competitive production of previously labor-intensive products in knowledge-based economies, therefore cutting opportunities for emerging and developing countries to grow at the expense of their affordable labor force. I mean that previously labor-intensive industries now are getting more technology-intensive, so they are probably moving back to the more advanced economies. Therefore, the developing countries are losing the advantage of the affordable labor force, which is a challenge, of course. There is no doubt that economies with the most flexible labor markets, education and legal system, as well as infrastructure, will benefit the most in the global innovative ecosystem. These are the topics that were also discussed, and we totally agree, and it's also in our agenda that as a government we address on a regular basis. However, at the same time, the ultimate effect on labor markets and the potential increase in inequality is also widely debated nowadays. Challenges for transition economies include widening of technology and knowledge gaps and its implication on skills, which is the case also in Georgia, of course. We all agree that innovation is central in this transformation, shaping new business models that make use of ongoing and forthcoming technological developments and shifts. Government of Georgia and Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development, which I represent in particular, has been keeping the momentum on Georgia's strong reform process, knowledge-based and innovation-driven economy development, both before, through the pandemic, and of course after the pandemic is over. It was a strong milestone that Georgia started building the innovation ecosystem very effectively since 2014, and had the clear mandate towards the fourth industrial revolution to stimulate innovation, modern technologies and R&D, to facilitate commercialization, support innovative startups and their competitiveness growth, and facilitate cooperation between representatives of science and businesses. We have brought the implementation of this agenda under the umbrella of Georgia's Innovation and Technology Agency, JITA, and Auto Kasradze, the chairman of JITA, is presented here, and you will have the opportunity to discuss with him the activities of JITA in more details, although you know, most of you you know about JITA's activities. The agency is established under the supervision of the Ministry of Economy, as I said, as a main coordinator and mediator of the innovation processes in the country. The project GINI, which is Georgia National Innovation Ecosystem, with the great support of World Bank, which we highly appreciate, has secured more than $23 million within this past period, with the main objective to increase innovative activities of the micro, small and medium-sized sectors, including startups and individuals in Georgia and their inclusion in digital economy. And of course, JITA aspires to prepare entrepreneurial ecosystem of Georgia to become competitive on a regional and international level, and I think personally that it has succeeded a lot. Just as an example, the very last component that we launched recently is the Accelerator Program, which we are very happy to run with the world-known leader company, 500 startups. And I would like to underline that this program was run and is running not only for Georgia, but for the region in wide. And we had dozens of applications from different regional countries, which some of them succeeded on, and now are at the final stage of the acceleration. And we already have several $million investment attraction at the very beginning of this program. And again, a good example how we can cooperate regionally from one country through inviting and attracting knowledge and technology which is recognized worldwide. As to the IT sector, in order to stipulate the needs, ICT labor market analysis was conducted through the project, which unsurprisingly demonstrated insufficient ICT workforce qualified to meet both the national and also, of course, international market requirements. There is a continuous skills mismatch, probably fueled by the widening gap between the demand and supply at this market. And it has become obvious that there is a need to develop a collaborative strategy to improve the digital skills of Georgian professionals in line with the economic and digital strategy of the country. In this regard, government of Georgia with its top-tier partners intends to elaborate and deliver a multi-phase training program to the competent individuals in Georgia, which will support the local labor force to meet international market requirements. The details of the program are the training, which will comprise of both ICT and non-ICT training courses, culminating in exams to obtain internationally recognized certification. 3,000 individual trainees are to be trained through this program, and the pilot phase of it to train 500 ICT specialists in 30 different topics, which is very important, will launch in the near future here in Georgia. Yet the trainings will be provided online. However, both trainings and certification exams will be financed by the government of Georgia, and it will be accessible for all Georgian citizens, of course, through the eligibility criteria of their technical and readiness. On the other hand, we are working on a legal framework, which was also mentioned by our EU colleagues as one of the pillars of the action plan. We are working on a legal framework of tax benefits for Georgia-based IT companies, which will incorporate a super attractive fiscal environment for IT business and will eventually help Georgia IT industry to get an extra boost. This regime will also attract, we believe it will also attract international IT companies to establish their offices here and work from Georgia, provided that the supply, again, the supply side of the skilled labor force will be on the appropriate level. We know that technological progress can assist human resource through labor augmenting technology or replace them via automation. But we also see the trends. Current technological progress has led to a higher relative demand for skilled labor and a relatively low demand for routine work, and surely brain drain, as it was also mentioned several times, and loss of talented resources is the biggest challenge for any country in this region and beyond. Going forward, we will be ready for this upcoming challenge and disseminate opportunities between us in order to keep the bright brains and ideas in the region. And I believe the brain drain can be effectively addressed by recognizing genuine talent and building unfavorable ecosystems in our countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Irakli. And Michael, back to you. From your perspective as a MCHAM chair, are there any IT companies that are members of MCHAM, and if they are there, what do they expect, what kind of assistance they expect from the chamber here in Georgia?
Well, as in my talks I mentioned the UGT,
yeah.
And of course the co-founder of UGT is the previous president, now the vice president of AmCham. So, I mean, they've been involved very much throughout the whole creation of AmCham. But for them as a member, like any other company, there's also networking. I mean, many of the other member companies are their clients, as is the government and is everywhere else. So they do get a better perspective of what are the challenges, what are the interests of all of the members. And I mean, we talk about cybersecurity, and we've talked about that. That is an interest. You know, all the banks are AmCham members, as are their clients also of UGT. So we did, at one point, we had an IT committee within AmCham. Mm-hmm. We don't now. You know, we found that it, for some reason, it didn't get the interest because there were only a few companies that really were in the IT business themselves. Something we probably need to look at again, because as we're coming into now, you know, with 5G networks and with situations with, and the cybersecurity is becoming more and more. And I've been very happy with how Georgia has responded from a cybersecurity standpoint. So we're considered to be, at the top, versus at the bottom. One other issue that I want to say that we've come a long way in Georgia, and thanks a lot to the U.S. government and all, is that we used to be at the top of the list in the world for pirated software. Now Georgia is not. You know, the government took on to make sure that it was all of its software, was certified software. Same thing with a lot of our clients, a lot of our members in the company. That's something that's been very, very successful, and something that Georgia also needs to hold up as showing to the rest, of the world that we can, when we put our minds to it, take care of some of these issues, particularly in the IP sector, with intellectual property.
I see. Thank you.
If I could add on to that, on pirated software, just to add on, it's not just that we really want to protect the intellectual property of these businesses, and pirated software obviously undercuts that, but also pirated software doesn't get the patches, doesn't get the updates, and ends up being a huge cyber vulnerability. And so I think that maybe 10 years ago the focus on pirated software was just the intellectual property, but I think as there are more and more threats, especially coming from China, people are realizing that networks that have pirated software are incredibly vulnerable.
Sure. I entirely agree with you, and I think that the matter of intellectual property for those countries are much more in favor of the country themselves, because till the countries would know how to protect intellectual property, they would not, the companies would not be interested to generate the added value in the countries. Sometimes the countries tend to think that it's about the states to protect Microsoft, but it's entirely wrong. It's in favor of the country themselves. And we see that in Belarus and Ukraine, the local companies are registering their IP in Cyprus, Delaware, or elsewhere, not in their own countries, for this specific reason. So I absolutely, and we institutionally strategists support the intellectual property protection of those countries. And there is interesting experience in Ukraine where the Brits are establishing the intellectual property rights court, the first of its kind in this region, and we would see how it would work.
Without those intellectual property rights, the innovation goes down. People want to make sure that they get value out of what they've created.
It's true. So, Catalin, if I may ask you, Georgia is one of the Eastern Partnership members countries, and last year we've invited Martin Bailey from Brussels to talk about a single digital market integration with Ukraine. What could you say about the single digital market and other digital projects in EU integration with institutional integration with Georgia?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the aim of the new digital transformation strategy is to extend the benefits of the digital single market to Eastern Partnership countries as well. I mean, there are different stages, different plans for each of the countries, depending on the stage of implementation for their association agreement. For those who have it, for those who don't have it, I think it's a bit more difficult. But I think even at this stage, Georgia close Ukraine as well. It's pretty advanced I think in the planning to get this digital progress done. I think that's a long-term objective anyway. Just to make it clear already for now. First, we have to get it rightly at the level of the action plan back in the EU, because at this moment, as we say, we have a communication and we plan to have a strategy, but once that is done, I think that will be easier to clarify exactly how we want to translate that into the Eastern Partnership countries. What is important for Georgia, and I think that is done already, as the Deputy Minister has said already, is that there is already laid ground here good enough for the, let's say, not necessarily approximation or harmonization, but at least to reap the benefits of the digital single market here on the ground. There is the national broadband strategy. Also, we plan, as I said, next year to put in place a program specifically focused on digital transformation, and hopefully that in a few years' time we will see a bit more really interconnection between the two. Important is that the implementation of the association agreement stays on track, because without that wider framework, that will be difficult to make progress on any fronts.
Thank you. And Irakli, if I may ask you, it's something that we know that maybe in 1 month will be declared here in Georgia about some new tax legislation for tech sector here, which will be in favor of new companies who are especially those who are coming from abroad and paying new money to Georgian economy. And I would be grateful if you could disclose part of this initiative, because it's important to those who are watching us online and maybe consider to open their operations here in Georgia.
Thank you, Anatoly. It's a very important question for us. Indeed, as I said in my remarks, it's a complex approach from the government of Georgia, which also covers the creation of attractive business environment in Georgia in terms of attracting high-level IT companies to start their businesses here. And the fiscal reform that is in progress now that I mentioned is one of the pillars to achieve this goal. It considers significant tax reliefs for IT companies that will relocate or open branches in Georgia and will start operation from here. I will not go into numbers and figures right now, but it will have significant decrease close to zero for the income tax, which is one of the major expense part in this business. And together with the programs, when we try to develop more skilled employees in IT sector, we think that together with these two components will work in favor of attracting more and more IT companies to Georgia. But besides the corporate approach that, again, this fiscal regime will target, we also work with individuals. And in my remarks, I mentioned that this, being successful, relatively successful with fighting with COVID, we should turn this into advantage together with other advantages that we have in this country. And just recently, you may be aware, we have launched the program of relocation for individuals to Georgia for a long stay, and this is specifically for freelancers, distance workers and business owners who can allow themselves to be based in Georgia and work remotely. And it's literally a couple of weeks that we launched this application form, the digital application form. They have almost 400 applications now. Majority of them are very interesting and promising. We have accepted more than 100 applicants already to enter Georgia, and proudly I would say that we also ask about their profession and what they will be doing in Georgia. I mean, which sphere they work, because we need this for our analytics. And the significant part of these people are IT specialists, which is again a very good sign that Georgia could be the place both for corporates and for individuals in IT sector to relocate here and to benefit from employment, to benefit from the tax regime, from Georgian hospitality and the safeness that we have created in this country in these not easy pandemic situations.
And I will ask you a very simple, very practical question. If company considers to relocate its activity to Georgia, who is the address for this company? Whom you should talk to? JITA, to Enterprise Georgia, to whom? I mean,
well, it's good that we have so many agencies that you can choose from, and I can assure you that both agencies that you mentioned, JITA and Enterprise Georgia, are very open and business-oriented. Since you mentioned Enterprise Georgia, I'm also supervising this agency as my part of my duty. We run a number of programs to support SMEs, both in terms of access to finance and skills development and knowledge-based support. So, and JITA, of course, is the main focal point for any kind of innovative and technology ideas and startups and established businesses to know about Georgia, to establish here and to navigate through not difficult, I would say rather easy bureaucracy, but still there are very reliable partners in the as JITA and Enterprise Georgia that you can work with both online and offline if in Georgia.
Thank you. Thank you, Irakli. And the next question I would like to address you, Michael. You've mentioned China and trusted vendors and untrusted vendors. And what are the benefits for the local, if we'll look on the market policy, for the local cellular providers to purchase more expensive but trusted equipment from Nokia and not cheap and untrusted equipment from Huawei?
I mean, I think that there are a variety of advantages. I think first and foremost, you want to make sure that your property is protected. What's true of American businesses is true of local businesses. Stealing intellectual property, network vulnerabilities. The United States is by no means the only victim of this, and so. If you're having a Georgian company, as I mentioned, there are cybersecurity threats from Russia, but if you're coming up with innovative IP, innovative intellectual property, you don't want that intellectual property stolen. The other thing that I'd say is that, there's an old expression in the United States, you get what you pay for. And, a lot of times, if a product is cheaper, there's a reason that it's cheaper. And so I think what we find with a lot of Chinese purchases when we're working with countries, they end up with buyer's regret. I've been in a lot of different countries where it's it was the cheapest bid up front, but then it broke. There was maintenance costs, and so one of the things that we encourage and we're encouraging in Georgia is when you do procurements, to look at the total total lifespan cost of a procurement. And I would say the same goes for businesses. When you're making purchases for businesses, look at the total cost. And then finally, I would say that if you want to start working internationally, it's important to companies that you have secure systems, as I mentioned. And I think this is going to become a bigger this factor is going to continue to grow, that businesses are going to look at what technology you're using and whether you're using safe technology when deciding when to invest, when deciding when to partner.
I could agree with you from governmental perspective, but still we support the market approach, and we're talking about the cellular providers who are companies. And at the end of the day, they prefer to provide more expensive services and to purchase cheaper equipment. So what could be incentive for the private business owner? And it's different from what you're saying about the security threats and security, if there is no regulation in place.
I'm going to disagree with you on that. I think that I don't think it's that different for the private businesses. I think that, if you're a private business and this piece of equipment looks like a great deal and you buy it and it's because it's cheap, and then you end up having to pay for the repairs of it, pay for maintenance of it, and it ends up in the long run being more expensive to you. It's a question of making business decisions, on the medium term at least, of what's going to keep your business profitable. And I would say the same with security. If you have a data breach that if you're an IT company, not an IT company, if you have a data breach, that is going to cost you money. And if your systems go down, when your systems are down, you're not serving your customers. So I don't think that the calculations for individual businesses are actually, in practical terms, all that different from the
Okay, good. Agree with
calculations
this.
for governments.
And Catalin, to you, the same question. We see what is the kind of struggle between the two technologies, the Western and the Chinese, from U.S. perspective. How does it look like from your office? Is it the Chinese equipment problem or issue is a very acute issue for you, or you have different approach as EU?
Yeah, I mean, that's a sensitive topic that normally is left by the decision of the member states. So there's no common decision that has been taken at the level of the European Commission. So that's one thing that is being anyway discussed in various circles in Brussels. And of course, that's a decision that belongs to each of the country on the basis of their sovereign, of course, rights.
I see. So Michael, if we can if we can look on AmCham activity, we've discussed it. Now about the university, American Georgian University. What do you think should be role of the private universities in tech education in Georgia, and what are the advantages of private education here, and you're not the only private university, versus the traditional universities here in this country?
First of all, I need to make a comment about IT education in general in the university structure. It's one of those it's kind of a unique situation where IT generally is one of the highest paid professions overall in the country, yet the cost of education is the lowest. Right? It's very strange. I mean, part of that comes also from because of the priority of IT education from the public universities. It's made sure that there are lots of scholarships, lots of grants given in that, and so on a competitive nature, also we in the private sector have to match that lower tuition. Now, what that does give a problem to is that it puts us, again at the same tuition level as the public universities, and it makes it harder for us to pay more for lecturers like we have in the other sectors, in the other faculties. So this gives us a problem with regards to being able to attract all of the best lecturers like we can in the other faculties where we can charge more. So it's kind of it's a dilemma that we have, and all of us private universities have that. But we find that, again, for us, and most of the other private universities, where we serve is that all of our programs are demand-driven. Whereas the public universities don't have that luxury as much, is that they have to provide a wide range of programs for a very diverse student body. So where we serve is that we can be much more focused. When I say, even when I talked about the difference in short courses and even in our GeoLab, they can be even more demand focused. So we have, again, it's a level of how many courses we can provide. So just from that perspective, where the private universities can provide something a little different is that we can charge more The public universities have looked at that and started, and there have been different initiatives. Can they charge more for those programs that do it? So we can provide a situation where we have been able to attract the best lecturers and provide those programs that we feel are the most demand-driven.
Thank you. And the last question I would like to address to you, Irakli, is your ministry is partner of this forum and the hosting party. And actually on this stage you have today the representative of two biggest partners of Georgia, European Union and the States. And from your perspective, what kind of assistance would you expect from the States and from EU to provide to Georgia to develop tech industry, innovative industry in this country?
Well, thank you for this question. And it's not about our expectations, but it's about the existing very intensive cooperation that is already in place. And again, the majority of the programs that we have in Georgia to support innovation, technology, IT, trainings, grants programs, Accelerator, and whatever we have in our portfolio, almost all of them are run and administered together in cooperation with our partners from EU, from United States, from World Bank, as I mentioned. And the most important part here is that this is continuous cooperation which has started several years ago, and I would say has matured at this stage, and has already delivered the results of quite a on an early stage, but already sustainable ecosystem that we benefit here in Georgia, and region also benefits around Georgia. So we are very grateful for this cooperation, and of course looking forward for continuous and development in this regard. This is not only like financial support, which is also very important, but most importantly, this is support in terms of knowledge, know-how, expertise, which we again highly appreciate, and looking forward for continuous cooperation with our partners.
Thank you so much, and we need to wrap up our session. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for our online audience for being with us this day. This session would remain available on our website and on Facebook page. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.